Today, we're speaking to Mark Huber, the head of brand and product marketing at Metadata. Mark walks us through his career journey, along with things like knowing when to be a generalist versus not, the importance of your manager in taking on a new role, and his top advice for less senior marketers who are looking to be in his position one day. Hope you enjoy. Hey, Mark, thanks for taking the time today. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, looking forward to this.
Awesome. Yeah, so would love for you to just briefly tell me about your journey. How did you get to where you are today?
So I always make a joke out of this. If you were to look at my LinkedIn profile, you'd maybe think, can he not make up in his mind? Like, why is he doing all these different things that aren't always super connected at the end of the day? And I knew I always wanted to be in marketing. And I also knew that I didn't want to get my MBA. So what I tried to do was create my own little marketing MBA and do different stints in marketing functions with the end goal of being a CMO of a venture-backed software company.
Yeah, I would love for you to dive into your current role. Tell me a bit more about metadata and tell me a bit more about what a head of brand does and why that's mixed in with product marketing in your case.
Yep. So if you aren't familiar with metadata, we are a marketing operating system. There are a ton of manual and repetitive tasks that B2B marketers drown in every single day. So we're trying to be the one tool that you use to automate all of the manual, repetitive, and really bullshit work that you don't want to do to free you up so you can work on the things that matter. Now, as far as what a head of brand and product marketing person does, I'll be the first to admit I made up that title myself, but it was intentional, and I'll tell you why. I think so much of product marketing and really brand marketing is about the story at the end of the day. And how you tell that story needs to be really consistent in every single interaction a prospect or buyer has with your particular company. So I made up that title about, a little, I'd say a year and a half-ish ago. And I don't want to say that I was the one that came up with it. Maybe I did, but I have noticed more brand and product marketing titles in B2B SaaS in the last year and a half.
So you mentioned on your LinkedIn in your first role that you got promoted to a people manager too soon. How does somebody know when it's time to start managing people and what would you consider too soon?
Yeah, I think oftentimes when people get promoted to a people manager, it's because they were really solid as an individual contributor. And I think that's why I got promoted to a people manager at, I think it was 24 when it happened. And I had no idea what I was doing as a people manager. I was just trying to do the same things that I was doing as an IC and then hoping that it worked as a people manager. So I've been a people manager in every stop since then. And I think outside of taking formal trainings and workshops and whatnot, I pull a lot of my own experience from what I've messed up myself and then how I've been managed and what I liked and what I didn't like. So I kind of use that to form my own management approach. I think the one big thing that people need to think through is, do you really want to be a people manager at the end of the day? And if the answer is no, that's okay. Like, you don't have to be a people manager to be successful. And I think people need to think through, what do they really want to do, over the course of a work week, what gives them energy, what takes energy away from them. And it's got to become more normal to be an IC and an older IC and not to manage people. I mean, sometimes I enjoy just doing the heads down work, and that's totally fine. I think people that get caught wanting to climb the ranks simply to get more pay, a higher title, whatever it may be, just so they can manage people, often find themselves unhappy because it's not really what they signed up for.
We'd love to hear more about your time at Uptake. You moved from a marketing ops manager to a senior manager in marketing ops, and you mentioned it's one of the best things that happened to your career. Why is that?
So that was the first time that I'd really done marketing ops work. I'd done a little bit of that at my previous stint at Symbiont Group, but for me, that was where I learned about metrics that actually matter to a marketing leader and what matters to the CEO and what matters to the board as well. So getting more familiar with those metrics was super important and really pivotal for my career. And then the other big thing is just looking at every single thing that marketing is doing and how do you show impact from that. So it opened up my eyes to a lot of things or tactics that are bad ideas at the end of the day. And usually those are very expensive and difficult to prove impact with. And then it also showed me, how do you make a case to get, new technology, new resources, new really just budget requests approved by a CMO and a CFO. So it was almost like part consulting, part marketing ops for me. But I think I look at that as a huge career experience for me. And I almost look at everything in the same lens of being a marketing ops person, because you got to be able to show impact and justify why you're doing things. And you have to do it with numbers. And if you don't, good luck, because it's not going to get approved.
And on the topic of being able to justify things in your role at Uptake and Fast Radius, You reported to the CMO for the first two times in your career, it seemed. What were some of the mistakes you made, and how would you avoid those, or how do you avoid them now?
Yeah, I mean, I made a lot of them. I think for me, I make a lot of mistakes, but one of my best qualities is I reflect on them and learn from them. And I think as long as you do that, it's encouraged to make mistakes. But some of the mistakes that I made earlier on were sharing too much information with them and not really the right information, and not asking upfront questions about what they cared about and why. And just assuming that, hey, this is what I think you care about or what you're interested in. And I got burned the first few times like that. So I think the more that you're able to have upfront conversations and really ask a lot of questions and clarifying questions of what the marketing leader is most interested in and why, then whenever you're reporting back on things, you know that you are reporting on the things that they actually care about, and it will set you up for success. And then I think for the second time reporting into a CMO, I was more experienced too, but then also I had my own ways that I wanted to go about things that oftentimes butted up against the way that the CMO wanted to do things. And I think for me, that was the first time that I really had to work through not like serious conflict, but moderate professional conflict, in that I wanted to do things one way, he wanted to do things one way. And how do you satisfy your boss at the end of the day while still creating enough space for you to do your thing and be successful?
Makes a ton of sense. And yeah, with Fast Radius on your LinkedIn, you mentioned, you left a little earlier than you had planned to join Metadata, which is a tool that you had tried out. How did you know it was time to jump ship? What was that decision criteria like for you?
Yeah, it was tough for me because one, I don't know if you remember what happened in March of 2020, but that was the little thing happened in the outside world, but it was
Yeah.
right around that time. And I think for me, it taught me a couple lessons. One, just being very intentional about how you work and how you want to be managed and how that meshes with your manager at the end of the day. If you have two very different working styles, then guess what? It's probably not going to work. So the more that I worked with that particular person, I still respect him. It just wasn't a good fit. It opened up my eyes of, all right, maybe this isn't the best place for you to succeed. Now, I was a member of Metadata's customer advisory board, and Jason Woodup, my then boss, he mentioned at the end of one of the calls that they were going to be hiring for the second full-time marketer at Metadata. And if anyone had referrals, that he would welcome those. So I don't know, within 5-10 minutes after that cab meeting had ended, I sent him a Slack after and said, I think you're expecting referrals here, but I would love to throw my name in the hat. And then that process played out over a couple months. It took a little bit longer because he wanted to hire someone else over me. Thankfully, he hired me. I will save that for another podcast episode. But I think one of the things that I was trying to do in terms of the criteria were look at your boss at the end of the day. It's one of the most important things that people, may not realize factors into how happy you're going to be at work. And what is that relationship like with your boss? How do they work? How do you work? How do they give feedback? How do you like to give feedback? That sort of thing. And then also, it was the first time that I had tried to, work for a company that solved a problem that I had experienced before in my previous roles. So for me, from a fulfillment perspective, that was a huge consideration because I truly knew what I was marketing and who I was marketing to. And I had lived it before. So I feel like my work output at the end of the day was that much better.
Yeah, there seems to be a common theme in many of your roles where you were one of the first marketers, you built out a lot of the foundational things. What would you say is the benefit of having this broad or foundational skill set? And with that, at what point in your career do you know when it's time to maybe move away from that generalist skill set and go and niche down?
Yeah, I think a couple things. So for me, it really depends on what do you enjoy doing as like a marketer or as just a professional. I got my start in consulting at Accenture, and I worked on a bunch of different accounts, did a bunch of different things, and I really liked the variety of what I was doing because it kept things new and exciting and fresh to me. So I think that experience shaped what I'm most interested in my career, which is being a generalist. And that is totally okay to be a generalist. You don't have to niche down and be a specialist in a particular area. You can go either of those two routes. I think, again, where people get themselves in trouble is they don't really know what they want to do. It is totally okay to niche down and be a specialist in one area. It is totally okay to be a generalist and work across a variety of different things. I think there's oftentimes like a stigma of being a generalist, like it's a bad thing. Like, no, you just have to know what you like and what you're good at. And just think through that, be very intentional about the positions that you take. And oftentimes, I've tried something that was a specialist role before, and then I've kind of bounced around and created my own like generalist background. And I wouldn't have learned what I liked and what I didn't like unless I tried those experiences.
You were director of growth at Metadata prior to your current role. You mentioned hitting your pipeline target for 5 quarters straight, which is awesome. What was the inflection point? What do you think led to the success for you guys?
Yeah, so I had joined Metadata in August of 2020, and Jason Widup, the VP of marketing then, he had joined, I think, probably like a week or 2 weeks before the pandemic hit. And our CEO, said, "Hey, the marketing budget that you thought that you were going to have? Well, guess what? I've got to cut it by, I think it was like 2/3. And you know what? I'm still going to keep your goals the same." So not really the best scenario that people dream about, working through and living in as a B2B marketer. But one of the things that we did at the start was we looked at LinkedIn conversation ads. So they've been around for about 3 years now, and LinkedIn has made some changes. But I think using that particular channel and then the different messaging that we used and the incentives that we used was an unbelievable first mover opportunity for us, because no one else really knew how to use LinkedIn conversation ads. And those that did later on kind of missed the initial movement and just interest and just, whoa, what is this? We're marketing marketers at the end of the day. So they really appreciated a new tactic they hadn't seen before. Now, I think we got a little too reliant on a single tactic, but what we always have done at Metadata is experiment with new channels. So we wouldn't have found that channel if we didn't experiment, and experimentation wasn't rooted in the core of like the company DNA. And as B2B marketers, the best ones are constantly experimenting with new channels to kind of prove things out before they invest more down the line. And one of the learning lessons for us at Metadata was, as you're doubling down on a particular channel, make sure that you're still setting aside 20% of your time and 20% of your budget with some of these new channels, so that when you do get your targets, increased and your budget is increased as well, that you already have a good sense of which channels and bets you're going to make because you've proven out some of these experiments already.
So on to the last question here. What advice would you give to less senior marketers who are looking to be in a role like yours one day?
Yeah, I love that question, because I was a less senior marketer and dreamed of being in the role that I'm in right now. And I wondered, like, how the hell do I get there? Like, I don't really know what I'm doing. And I think there's two things that come to mind. One, if you're worried about imposter syndrome, just realize that everyone struggles with it and no one really knows what they're doing at the end of the day. I mean, you get more experience in time, but I've talked with very experienced marketers who I thought were light years ahead of my career. And guess what? We're pretty similar in a lot of ways. They may have more experience, but they don't know that much compared to me. So forget about imposter syndrome. I think the sooner that you realize that, the more confident that you can be. And that allows you to take more chances and just take on new things in your particular role that will help get you more experience. And then the other thing is this: I think LinkedIn in particular for B2B marketers is an unbelievable channel to learn, in. Follow big name people that you look up to, follow people who might be a little bit further ahead of you in your career. And you'd be surprised how much I learned over the last, handful of years just on LinkedIn, on YouTube, listening to podcasts. Marketing Twitter is kind of scary for me, so I don't really go on marketing Twitter too much, but there's so much out there that is free for the most part that you can consume and learn from. And I think for me, that was how I learned a lot of this stuff, and it earned me the opportunity to take bigger chances at work. And when those chances, then create bigger opportunities, like just keep doing that, and you'd be surprised how much you can learn.
Cool. Well, Mark, it's been a pleasure. I appreciate you sharing all of your amazing insights.
Thanks for having me. This was fun.